Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Aren't you a little tired? Maybe you're not, but it's getting ready to get opened. Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, discredited FISA warrants. All this mess that's come out apparently was set up by the Democrats to embarrass the president. And Attorney General William Barr now says, I want to find out if the FBI broke the law to spy on the Trump campaign. And he's appointed his own special prosecutor to find out. Heather Sells has that.
The special prosecutor will investigate allegations that the president and his supporters have long proclaimed that the Obama administration used the intelligence community to illegally spy on the Trump campaign.
It is a very dangerous thing when law enforcement or the intelligence community is used as a political weapon, when it's used to target your political adversaries.
Senator Ted Cruz calls the investigation a welcome development. He says many Texans believe the Obama administration weaponized the Department of Justice and the FBI to go after the Trump campaign.
I'm very glad Attorney General Barr is demanding some accountability. We need to investigate it. We need to investigate how politicized it was. And in particular, we need to see what were the roles of the political appointees. Who signed off on it? Was it Loretta Lynch? Was it John Brennan? What was it Joe Biden? Was it President Obama himself?
Senator Tom Cotton told CBN News that the investigation could be damaging to Democrats.
Attorney General Barr is looking into the origins of this investigation going back to 2016. As he said, he wants to know if the spying that was done on the Trump campaign had a proper predicate. I think a lot of Democrats are very worried about what that probe is going to turn up.
Attorney General William Barr has appointed John Durham, the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, to conduct the inquiry. He's a career prosecutor nominated by President Trump for his post. The Senate unanimously confirmed Durham, and the two Democratic lawmakers from Connecticut called him fierce and fair. Ken Starr, who served as an independent counsel during the Clinton presidency, praised the choice Monday night.
We have perhaps the most respected prosecutor in the United States who served so brilliantly, including some assignments during the Obama administration. He's totally above politics.
Durham's appointment comes just weeks after Barr told members of Congress that he was building a team to investigate spying against the Trump campaign.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I guess you could. I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur. But the question is whether it was adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I'd need to explore that.
The Durham inquiry is separate from an investigation by the Justice Department's Inspector General that is also examining the Russia probe origins, and Barr expects it to be finished this month or next. Heather Sells, CBN News.
You know, I am a great fan of the FBI, but the leadership that was in place during all this stuff has disgraced that great organization. I'm sure the agents who have given their lives to serve in the FBI are appalled at what the leadership has done. And when you look at Strzok and Lisa Page and these other people that are sending emails back and forth, how do we stop Trump? How do we get at him? The FBI shouldn't be even considering something like that. It should be above the political fray, but it's not. And so the Inspector General, I think we've just begun to peel the onion. There's a lot of stuff in there that's going to be bad. There's something else that's going on in the world that I think is important. There have been apparently drone attacks on the Saudi oil pipelines, bringing the Saudi crude to market. There were attacks on as many as 4 ships, and it looked like it's traced to Iran. So is it Iran that's putting it up, or is it the Houthi rebels? We don't know for sure, but we're going to be giving you more information on that on this program. It's very important, and it might lead to war in the Middle East. Well, despite a sharp drop in the stock market Monday, President Trump says he's staying the course on this China trade policy. Ephraim Graham has more.
Pat, U.S. trade officials expect to release a list of more Chinese products targeted for possible tariffs today. It comes after China's decision to impose tariffs on some $60 billion in U.S. imports Monday. Now, the move saw the stock market drop more than 600 points. Global markets lost more than $1 trillion in value. Still, President Donald Trump says he is confident the U.S. and China will reach a deal, and he's looking forward to his meeting with President Xi Jinping in June.
We're going to be meeting, as you know, at the G20 in Japan, and that'll be, I think, probably a very fruitful meeting.
Right now, the administration is looking at imposing tariffs on another $300 billion on Chinese goods. America's farmers and consumers will feel the impact. The administration is proposing to help farmers with $15 billion in bailouts. One pro-trade group says the tariffs could cost a family of four more than $700 a year. Pat?
Well, the markets are roiled because the idea of a trade war between the United States and China is just appalling. And we just don't know, has the president really thought through all of this? I mean, this isn't like he's dealing to buy a property in New York to build a tower on. I mean, this is the trade of all the various people in America, all the goods that come into America, and he thinks somehow the Chinese are paying for it. The Chinese aren't paying for it. The tariffs are costing American consumers. If we raise tariffs on Chinese goods, that means that the American consumer is paying more money for them. And, you know, in terms of Chinese tariffs, well, China can't really afford to have a major economic slowdown. When I was up there talking to Zhu Rongji, they were looking at 8 or 9% GDP growth. It was really a big deal. Now, and I again spoke with the head of poverty alleviation. They have a huge number, as many as 75 million more people that are on the edge of poverty. And poverty is defined as 1,000 calories a day of food. I mean, it's just nothing. You know, it's barely subsistence living, and that's their poverty level. The country can't stand it, and I think Xi knows that, but at the same time, they're not going to allow the Western white people to take advantage of them that took place during the Opium Wars. They're not going to have that again. So you've got a willful president against a willful Chinese dictatorship. And it could hurt the world terribly. Well, we just hope something will be worked out. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, there's a serious problem. Several ships carrying Saudi oil have been attacked near the UAE. The finger is now pointing at Iran as the source. Recently, overnight, there were drone attacks on Saudi pipelines. Is it the Houthi rebels from Yemen, or is it Iran trying to stir up a war? Ephraim has more.
Pat, the White House is reviewing its military options against Iran, including a plan that could send up to 120,000 troops to the Middle East if the Islamic regime attacks American forces or steps up its nuclear weapons program. Iran and its proxies are suspected of carrying out attacks in the region. Today, drones carrying explosives attacked 2 Saudi oil stations on a vital pipeline. Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen claimed responsibility for launching the drones. Iran is suspected of sabotaging 4 ships, including 2 Saudi Arabian oil tankers near the UAE this week. Iran has also threatened to attack U.S. forces in the region. Monday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo made an unscheduled visit to Brussels to brief European officials on Iran's increasing threats. A California jury ordered the agricultural business giant Monsanto to pay more than $2 billion to a couple who says the company's popular weed killer Roundup Ready caused their cancers. Jurors awarded $1 billion each to the couple in punitive damages and $55 million in compensatory damages. The EPA considers the weed killer safe. Pat?
I imagine the stockholders of Bayer are just going out of their minds because they bought Monsanto. It looked like a good business deal, and now they're being faced with these lawsuits. There is no way a $2 billion judgment is going to be allowed to stand. Is it excessive? It is just not proportional to the damage that was done, and it will obviously be overturned, but nevertheless, Monsanto is saying, look, this Roundup, the chemical involved is not carcinogenic. And others are saying, yes, it is carcinogenic. But Bayer must be, as I say, the stockholders must be pulling their hair out when they think that they got involved in buying a company that looked like a very good business proposition and suddenly is being torn apart by a lawsuit over something that is called glyphosate, that is the main ingredient in Roundup, and it's been used throughout the food chain. So when you're eating corn, you're eating kale, you're eating other things, you can be aware of the fact that those vegetables carry glyphosate. Because Roundup has been used to kill weeds all over the agricultural realm. So if indeed it is carcinogenic, we're all in trouble, and we'll see what that is. Ephraim has more about an incredible law that is, well, in danger of being passed.
Pat, a controversial bill protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community is drawing fire. The House is set to vote on the Equality Act this week. As Abigail Robertson now explains, critics say it is a threat to religious liberty.
Males identifying as females using the women's locker room. Faith-based adoption and foster agencies required to place children with same-sex couples. And florists forced to fill orders for same-sex weddings. Critics tell me these are just a few of the potential results if the Equality Act becomes law.
Every American should be treated with dignity and respect, but our laws need to protect the constitutionally guaranteed rights that we have.
Greg Baylor in the Alliance Defending Freedom handled numerous religious liberty cases in states where laws like the Equality Act already exist.
Now, under the Equality Act, we will have a nationwide law, so we will see a proliferation of instances where Christians and others are being coerced to violate their beliefs in order to comply with such a law.
While introducing the bill, Democrat lawmakers talked about making the protection of same-sex individuals a priority over other constitutional freedoms.
We cannot allow claims of religious freedom to be used to discriminate against an LGBT individual.
In requiring things like faith-based adoption agencies to place children with same-sex couples, opponents fear religious liberty cases will pop up all over the country. The bill is expected to pass a Democrat-controlled House and even has a few Republican supporters. But as of now, the Senate is not expected to bring it to the floor this session. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
And we have this word from the White House. The Trump administration absolutely opposes discrimination of any kind and supports the equal treatment of all. However, this bill in its current form is filled with poison pills that threaten to undermine parental and conscience rights. Pat, back to you.
Well, Matt Staver, who's founder of Liberty Counsel, calls the Equality Act a dangerous threat to religious freedom. He's absolutely right. He's joining us now from Florida. Matt, tell us about this thing. What are the consequences of this iniquitous piece of legislation?
Well, the best way to conceptualize this, Pat, is that what you cannot do legally respecting race, you will not be able to do legally respecting anything related to LGBT. And this includes churches and religious organizations. So churches, for example, now are not able to both morally, biblically, and certainly legally have segregated restrooms, shower rooms, locker rooms, etc. And so under this bill, what you cannot do regarding race, that will be the same regarding LGBT. So you will not be able to prevent men from using women's private facilities. And this, Pat, includes churches. It not only elevates LGBT to the same protected level as race, but it expands excessively the current federal laws, many of them. It repeals the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was passed overwhelmingly in 1993, signed into law by Bill Clinton. So you can't use religious free exercise as a claim or a defense. And it makes abortion a federally protected civil right and would require the funding of abortion through Medicaid, Medicare, and other sources as well. So this is exceptionally broad. It is clearly, as the president, as the White House has stated in that statement, filled with many poison pills. It is by far the biggest threat to religious freedom and freedom in general and the sanctity of human life that I've ever seen come out of Congress.
Well, you know, the Constitution, we talk about the First Amendment, but it says Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion. They made a big deal, but said, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This law would completely nullify that part of the Constitution. Is that right?
Exactly, it would. And so for churches and for Christian universities and colleges, say, for example, like Regent and others, you would, if you did not comply with these mandates, if you refused to allow a man, to sleep in a hotel room in the same room with a girl when they're on an overnight athletic event or something else, when they're on an overnight stay, that would be like race discrimination, and this would be discrimination on the basis of LGBT. That would result in loss of tax exemption, and it could also affect accreditation of colleges and universities. So this is exceptionally broad. It covers every area of our lives. Churches, nonprofits, for-profits, online home businesses. It covers everything. It's an excessive overreach. It is filled with two of the Democratic priorities in the House: LGBT and abortion, and guts religious freedom.
Matt, you know, this LGBT, it wasn't long ago that somebody was having a sex change, and it was a relatively rare thing. Suddenly the people who are having sex changes have got a protected status. LG is lesbian, bisexual. What is that? What do those initials all stand for?
You know, it's really lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and then they add many other letters of the alphabet. Q for questioning, you don't know what you are. And under the transgender, it's not just someone who's gender confused, a man who wants to be a woman or vice versa. It's someone also who wants to be neither. Believe it or not, there are people who are claiming that they're neither male nor female, and they prefer and they demand, and under this law, they will be required to be addressed by the pronoun they. That's right, the plural pronoun they. This is exceptionally broad. You're not going to be able to get away from this if it's passed. It will certainly pass in the House. The real battle will be to stop it in the Senate. There's already 45 or so co-sponsors in the Senate. All the Democrats are lining up there, including at least one Republican. But I think that's the battle where we can stop it. We don't need to let it get to the president's desk for a veto. It needs to be stopped in the Senate because it is literally culture changing in so many aspects.
Matt, where did it come from? I've been doing these things for years and years, but it looks like the last 5 or 10 years, this suddenly gained incredible momentum. What's the origin of it? Who's sponsoring all these things?
You know, it makes no sense, but what we see is an exponential, rapid growth of this LGBT issue. And the LGBT issue is intolerant. And the target is religious freedom, churches, people of faith, because that's the last bastion that holds to Judeo-Christian values. And that's why this literally guts religious freedom. Chuck Schumer was a co-sponsor of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and this law, for the very first time, specifically says you cannot use the Religious Freedom Restoration Act as a claim or defense. So it literally guts religious freedom. The ultimate target is religious freedom, people of faith. This would also reverse the ability of churches, synagogues, and mosques to make hiring decisions based upon their religion. So in other words, a synagogue preferring Jews over Muslims would be in violation. A church preferring Christians over atheists would be in violation of this law.
Can you get Jewish support for this, for the work you're doing?
I think we can get Jewish support. I think we can get a broad-based support, because once you really start to look at this law, it's really right there on the surface. It literally removes the law's protection that goes all the way back to 1964, that churches, houses of worship, can make hiring, employment decisions based upon their faith. It makes sense that Catholics should be able to prefer Catholics in their church. Protestants should be able to prefer Protestants, Jews, Jews, Muslims, Muslims. But this literally repeals that ability across the board. So I think the more people become aware of this bill, maybe not with some of the radicalism that's happening in the Congress, particularly in the House, but the grassroots, religious faith leaders and faith communities, once they realize the impact of this bill, it's far beyond just LGBT. As bad as that is, as dangerous as that is to freedom, it is a broad-based repeal of religious freedom across the board.
Well, Matt, thank you for being, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I wanted to ask our audience now, I think you should call your senator or your congressman, your representative. The telephone number for the Capitol Hill switchboard is 202-224-3121. And you can call in and say, I object to this bill. I want you to vote against it. And the thing is coming up in the House, apparently, and it's going to be pushed in the Senate. Let me give you that number. There it is, 202-224-3121. That's the switchboard, and I think everybody in this audience right now, go to your telephones and jam up those phones up there and let them know that you are opposed to what is called the religious,
Equality Act.
The Equality Act. It's just, of course, it's got a name and all. They always give the good names to these things. This is a devastating blow to religious freedom and to the sanctity of America. If you want to bring the judgment of God on this nation, you just keep this stuff up. You know, I was reading in Leviticus where it said, because of these things, the land will vomit you out. Vomit you out. I think God will say, I've had it with America. If you do this kind of stuff, I'm going to get rid of you as a nation. And, you know, there's plenty of stuff that's going on when you look at the potential of atomic war, when you look at the solar strike, you know, something on our grid there. You can go down the line of devastation that could happen to our nation. We don't want that. We don't want it. We want the blessing of God, not the curse of God. So, again, call your don't let these people get away with this nonsense. This is absolutely an outrageous. It's an attack on your religious freedom, on the freedom of churches, the freedoms of synagogues, you know, whoever. They're an attack on you, and you don't want that. Again, that number is on your screen, 202-224-3121. Call your senator or call your congressman and say, I'm opposed to this, this so-called Equality Act, okay?